Blown to Bits, Your Life, Liberty, and Happiness After the Digital Explosion by Hal, Ken, and Harry. Chapter 1, Digital Explosion. Why is it happening, and what's at stake? On September 19, 2007, while driving home alone near Seattle on her way to work, Tanya Ryder went off the road and crashed into a ravine. For 8 days she was trapped upside down in the wreckage of her car. Severely dehydrated and suffering from injuries to her leg and shoulder, she nearly died of kidney failure. Fortunately, rescuers ultimately found her. She spent months in a rehabilitation medical facility. Happily, she was able to go home for Christmas. Tanya's story is not about a woman, an accident, and a rescue. It is a story about bits, zeros and ones that make up our cell phone coverage, our conversations, bank records, and everything else that gets communicated and stored using modern electronics. Tanya was found because cell phone companies keep records of cell phone locations. When you carry your cell phone, it regularly sends out a digital ping, a few bits conveying "Hello, I'm hi," or "Here I am" message. Your phone keeps pinging as long as it remains turned on. Nearby cell phone towers pick up the pings and send them to your cellular service provider. Your cell phone company uses the pings to direct your incoming calls to the right cell phone towers. Tanya's cell phone company, Verizon, still had a record of the last location of her cell phone, even after the phone had gone dead. That's how the police found her. So why did it take them more than a week? If a woman disappears, her husband can't just make the police find her by tracing their cell phone record. She has a privacy right, and maybe she has a good reason to leave town without telling her husband where she is going. In Tanya's case, her bank account showed some activity, more bits, after her disappearance, and the police could not classify her as a missing person. In fact, that activity was her husband. Through some misunderstanding, the police thought he did not have access to the account. Only when the police suspected Tanya's husband of involvement in her disappearance did they have the legal access to her cell phone records. If they had continued to act on the true presumption that he was blameless, Tanya might have never been found. New technologies interacted in an odd way with an evolving standard of privacy, telecommunications, and criminal law. The explosive combination almost cost Tanya Ryder her life. Her story is dramatic, but every day we encounter unexpected consequences of data flows that could not have happened a few years ago. When you have finished reading this book, you should see the world in a different way. You should hear a story from a friend or a newscast and say to yourself, "That's really a bit story," even if no one mentions anything digital. The movements of physical objects and the actions of flesh and blood human beings are only the surface. To understand what is really going on, you have to see the virtual world, the eerie flow of bits steering the events of life. This book will guide you to this new world. The explosions of bits and everything else. The world changed very suddenly. Almost everything is stored on computers somewhere: court records, grocery records, precious family photos, pointless radio programs. Computers contain a lot of stuff that isn't used today, but someone thinks that it might someday come in handy. It is all being reduced to zeros and ones, bits. The bits are stashed on disks of home computers and the data centers of big corporations and government agencies. The disks hold so many bits that there is no need to pick and choose what gets remembered. So much digital information, misinformation, data, and garbage is being squirreled away that most of it will be seen only by computers, never meant for human eyes. The computers are getting better and better at extracting meaning from those bits, finding patterns that sometimes solve crimes and make useful suggestions, and sometimes reveal things about ourselves we did not expect others to know. In March 2008, the resignation of Eliot Spitzer as governor of New York is a bit story as well as a prostitution story. Under anti-money laundering rules, banks must report transactions of more than $10,000 to federal regulators. None of Spitzer's alleged payments reached that threshold, but bank's computer found that transactions of smaller sums formed a suspicious pattern. The AML rules exist to fight terrorism and organized crime. But while the computer was monitoring small banking transactions in search of big time crimes, it exposed a simple payment for services rendered that brought down the government. Once something is on a computer, it can replicate and move around the world in a heartbeat. Making 1 million perfect copies takes but an instant. Copies of things we want everyone in the world to see, but also copies of things that weren't meant to be copied at all. The digital explosion is changing the world as much as printing once did, and some of the changes are catching us unaware, blowing our assumptions about the world, about the way the world works. When we observe the digital explosion at all, it can seem benign, amusing, even utopian. Instead of sending prints through the mail to Grandma, we put our pictures of our children on a photo album website such as Flickr. Then not only Grandma can see them, but Grandma's friends and anyone else. So what? They are cute and harmless, but suppose a tourist takes a vacation snapshot and you just happen to appear in their background at a restaurant where no one knew you were dining. If the tourist uploads his photo, the whole world could know you were there and when you were there. Data leaks. Credit card companies are supposed to stay locked up in a data warehouse, but escape into the hands of identity thieves. And we sometimes give information away just because we get something back for doing so. A company will give you free phone calls to anywhere in the world if you don't mind catching. As for products, it's computers here you're talking about. And those are merely things that are happening today. The explosion and the social disruption it will create have barely begun. We already live in a world in which there is enough memory just in digital cameras to store every word of every book in the Library of Congress 100 times over. So much email is being sent that it could transmit the full text of the Library of Congress in 10 minutes. Digitalized pictures and sounds take up more space than words, so emailing the images, movies, and sounds may take a year, but that is just today. The explosive growth is still happening. Every year we can store more information, move it more quickly, and do far more ingenious things with it than we could the year before. So much disk storage space is being produced every year that it could be used to record a page of information every minute or two about you and every other human being on Earth. A remark made long ago can come back to haunt a political candidate. A letter jotted quickly can be the key discovery for a biography. Imagine what it would mean to record every word every human being speaks or writes in a lifetime. The technology barrier to do that has already been removed. There is enough storage to remember it all. Should any social barriers stand in the way? Sometimes things seem to work both better and worse than they used to. A public record is now very public. Before you got hired in Nashville, Tennessee, your employer could figure out if you were caught 10 years ago taking an illegal left turn in Lubbock, Texas. The old notion of a sealed court record is mostly a fantasy in a world where any tidbit of information is duplicated, cataloged, and moved about endlessly. With hundreds of TV and radio stations and millions of websites, Americans love the variety of news sources, but are still adjusting uncomfortably to the displacement of more authoritarian sources. In China, the situation is reversed. The technology is creating greater government control of the information its citizens receive and better tools for monitoring their behavior. This book isn't about how the digital explosion is changing everything. It explains the technology itself, why it creates so many surprises, and why things don't work the way we expect them to. It is also about the things the information explosion is destroying. Old assumptions about privacy, about our identity, and about who is in control of our lives. It is about how we got this way, what we are losing, and what remains that society still has a chance to put right. The digital explosion is creating both opportunities and risks. Many of both will be gone in a decade, settled one way or another. Governments, corporations, and other authorities are taking advantage of the chaos, and most of us don't even see it happening. We all have a stake in the outcome. Beyond the science, the history, the law, and the politics, this book is a wake-up call. It forces the shaping of your future. The forces shaping your future are digital, and you need to understand them. The Conan of bits. Bits behave strangely. They travel almost instantly, and they take almost no space to store. We liken them to dynamite exploding or water flowing. We even use social metaphors for bits. We talk about two computers agreeing on some bits, and people and about people using burglary tools to steal bits. Getting the right metaphor is important, but also knowing the limitations of the metaphor. The imperfect metaphor can mislead as much as an apt metaphor can illuminate. Claude Shannon. Claude Shannon is the undistributed founding figure of the information and telecommunication theories. While working at Bell Laboratories after the Second World War, he wrote a seminal paper, The Mathematical Theory of Communication, which foreshadowed much of the subsequent developments of digital technologies. Published in 1948, this paper gave birth to the now universal recognition that the bit is the natural unit of information, and to the use of the term. We use truths about bits. We call them Conans because they are paradoxes, like Zen verbal puzzles that provoke meditation and enlightenment. These Conans are oversimplifications and overgeneralizations. They describe the world that is developing but hasn't fully emerged. But even today they are truer than we often realize. These themes will echo through our tales of the digital explosion. Con 1. It's all just bits. Your computer successfully creates the illusion that it contains photographs, letters, songs, and movies. But it really contains all it really contains is bits, lots of them, patterned in ways you can't see. Your computer was designed to store just bits. All the files and folders and different kinds of data are illusions created by the computer programmers. When you send an email containing a photograph, the computers that handle your message as it flows through the internet have no idea what they're handling. It is part text and part graphic. The telephone calls are also just bits. That has helped us create competition. Traditional phone companies, cell phone companies, cable television companies, and VoIP service providers can just shuffle bits around to each other to complete calls. The internet was designed just to handle bits, not emails or attachments, which are inventions of software engineers. We couldn't live without these more intuitive computer concepts, but they're artifacts. Underneath it, it's all just bits. This Conan is more consequential than you might think. Consider the story of NAR Pro-Choice America and Verizon Wireless. NARL wanted to form a text message group to send alerts to its members. Verizon decided not to allow it, citing the controversial and unsavory things the messages might contain. Text message alert groups for political candidates it would allow, but not for political causes it deemed controversial. Had NARL simply wanted a telephone service or an 800 number, Verizon would have no choice. Telephone companies were long ago declared common carriers. Like railroads, telephone companies are legally prohibited from picking and choosing customers from among those who want their services. In the bits world, there is no difference between a text message and a wireless phone call. It's just bits traveling through the air by radio waves. But the law hasn't caught up with the technology. It doesn't treat all bits the same. The common carriage rules for voice bits don't apply to text messages. Verizon backed down on its case against NARL, but not on the principle. A telephone company can do whatever it thinks will maximize its profits in deciding whose messages to distribute. Yet no sensible engineering distinction can be drawn between the text message, phone calls, and other bits traveling through the digital airwaves. Exclusive and rivalrous. Economists would say that bits, unless controlled somehow, tend to be non-exclusive. Once a few people have them, it's hard to keep them from others. And non-rivalrous. When someone gets them from me, I don't have any less. In a letter he wrote about the nature of ideas, Thomas Jefferson eloquently stated both properties. If nature has made anything less subtle than others, exclusive property, it is the action of thinking power, called an idea, which an individual may exclusively possess as long as he keeps it to himself. But the moment it is divulged, it forces itself into the possession of everyone, and the receiver cannot dispossess himself of it. Its peculiar character, too, is that if no one possesses the less because everyone possesses the whole of it. Conan 2. Perfection is normal. To err is human. When books were laboriously transcribed by hand in the ancient Saporia and medieval monasteries, errors crept into every copy. Computers and networks work differently. Every copy is perfect. If you email a photograph to a friend won't receive a fuzzier version of the original. The copy will be identical, down to the levels of detail too small for the eye to see. Computers do fail, of course. Networks break down too. If the power goes out, nothing works at all. So the statement that copies are normally perfect is only relatively true. Digital copies are perfect only to the extent that they can be communicated at all. And yes, it's possible in theory that every single bit of a big message will arrive incorrectly. But networks don't just pass bits from one place to another. They check to see if their bits seem to have been damaged in transit, and correct them or retransmit them if they seem incorrect. As a result of these error detection and correction mechanisms, the odds of an actual error, a character being wrong in an email, for example, are so low that it would probably be wiser to worry instead about a meteor hitting your computer, improbable though precision meteor strikes may be. The phenomenon of perfect copies has drastically changed the law, a story told in Chapter 6, Balance Toppled. In the days when music was distributed on audio tape, teenagers were not prosecuted for making copies of songs because the copies weren't as good as the originals, and even the copies of the copies were even worse. The reason that thousands of people today are receiving threats from the music and movie industries is that their copies are perfect. Not just as good as the original, but identical to the original, so that even the notation of original is meaningless. The dislocations caused by the file sharing are not over yet. The buzzword of the day is intellectual property, but bits are an odd kind of property. Once I release them, everyone has them, and if I give you my bits, you don't have any fewer. Conan 3. There is want in the midst of plenty. Fast as the world of data storage is today, 5 years from now it will be 10 times larger. Yet the information explosion means, paradoxically, the loss of information that is not online. One of us recently saw a new doctor at his clinic that he has been using for decades. She showed him the dense charts of his blood chemistry data transferred from his home medical device to the clinic's computer, more data than any specialist could have at her disposal 5 years ago. The doctor then asked whether he had ever had a stress test and what the test had shown. Those records should all be there, the patient explained, in the medical file, but it was in the paper file, which the doctor did not have access to. It was in the computer's memory, and the patient's memory was being used as a poor substitute. The old data might as well as not existed at all, since it wasn't digital. Even information that exists in a digital form is useless if there are no devices to read it. The rapid progress of storage engineering has meant that data stored on obsolete devices effectively ceases to exist. In Chapter 3, Ghost of the Machine, we shall see how the 20th century update to the 18th century British Doomsday Book was useless by the time it was only in its 16th. Was useless by the time it was only a 16th of the age of its original. Or consider the subject of Chapter 4, Needles in the Haystack. At first, search engines such as Google and Yahoo were interesting conveniences, which a few people used for special purpose. The growth of the World Wide Web has put so much information online that search engines are for many people the first place to look for something before they look in books or ask friends. In the process, appearing predominantly in search engine has become a matter of life and death for businesses. We may move on to purchase from a competitor if we can't find the site we wanted on the first page or two of the results. We may assume something didn't happen if we can't find it quickly on an online news service. If it can't be found and quickly, it just doesn't exist at all. Moore's Law. Gordon Moore, founder of Intel Corporation, observed that the density of integrated circuits seemed to double every couple of years. This observation is referred to as Moore's Law. Of course, it is not a natural law like the law of gravity. Instead, it is an empirical observation of the progress of engineering and a challenge to engineers to continue their innovations. In 1965, Moore predicted that that this exponential growth would continue for quite some time. That has continued for more than 40 years is one of the great models of modern engineering. No other effort in history has sustained anything like that growth rate. Processing power. The speeds of computers is usually measured by the number of basic operations such as additions that can be performed in 1 second. The fastest computers available in the 1940s could perform about 5 operations per second. The fastest computer today can perform about 1 trillion. Buyers of personal computers know that the machine that seems to be fast today will slow down in a year or two. For at least 3 decades, the increase of processor speeds was exponential. Computers became twice as fast every couple of years. These increases were one consequence of Moore's law. Since 2001, processor speed has not followed Moore's law. In fact, processors have hardly grown faster. But that doesn't mean that computers won't continue to get faster. New chip design, including multiple processors on the same chip, so the work can be split up and performed in parallel. Such design innovations promise to achieve the same effect as continued increases in raw processor speed. And the same technology improvements that make computers faster also make them cheaper. The rapid increase in processing power means that innovations move out of the labs and into consumer goods very quickly. Robot vacuum cleaners and self-parking vehicles were possible in theory a decade ago, and now they have become economically feasible. Tasks that today seem to require uniquely human skills are the subject of research projects in corporations or academic laboratories. Face recognition, voice recognition are poised to bring us new inventions such as telephones that know who is calling and surveillance cameras that don't need humans watching them. The power comes not just from the bits, but from being able to do things with those bits. Conans 5. The same can be a whole new thing. The explosive growth is exponential growth, doubling at a steady rate. Imagine you're earning 100% interest on your savings account. In 10 years, your money will have increased more than 1,000-fold, and in 20 years, more than 1,000,000-fold. A reasonable interest rate of 5% will hit the same growth rate, just 14 times slower. Epidemics initially spread exponentially as each infected individual infects several others. When something grows exponentially for a long time, it may seem not to be changing at all. If we don't watch it steadily, it will seem as though something discontinues and radical occurs while we weren't watching. That is why epidemics first go unnoticed, no matter how catastrophic they may be when full-blown. Imagine one sick person is infecting 2 healthy people, the next day each of those infects 2 others, and the next day after that each of those infects those 4 infect 2 others, and so on. The number of newly infected each day grows from 2 to 4 to 8. In a week, 128 people come down with the disease in a single day, and twice that number are now sick. But in a population of 10 million, no one notices. Even after a week or 2 weeks, barely 3 people in 1,000 are sick. But after another week, 40% of the population is sick and society collapses. Exponential growth is actually smooth and steady. It just takes very little time to pass from anything. Exponential growth of anything can suddenly make the world look utterly different than it had been. When the threshold is passed, changes that are just quantitative can look qualitative. Another way of looking at the apparent abruptness of exponential growth, its explosive force, is to think about how little lead time we have to respond to it. Our hypothetical epidemic took 3 weeks to overwhelm the population. At what point was it only half as devastating? The answer is not a week and a half. The answer is on the next to last day. Suppose it took a week to develop and administer a vaccine. Then noticing the epidemic after only a week and a half would have left ample time to prevent the disaster. But it would have required understanding that there was an epidemic when only 2,000 out of 10 million were infected. The information story is full of examples of unperceived changes followed by dislocating explosions. Those with the foresight to notice the explosion just a little earlier than everyone else can reap huge benefits. Those who move a little too slowly may be overwhelmed by the time they try to respond. Take the case of digital photography. In 1983, Christmas shoppers could buy digital cameras to hook up to their IBM PC and Apple II computers. The potential was there for anyone to see. It was not hidden in secret corporate laboratories. But digital photography did not take off. Economically and practically it couldn't. The cameras were too bulky to put in your pocket, and the digital memories were too small to hold many images. 14 years later, film photography was still a robust industry. In early 1997, Kodak stock hit its record price with a 22% increase in quarterly profit, fueled by a healthy film and paper sales and its motion picture film business, according to a news report. The company raised its dividends for the first time in 8 years, but by 2007, digital memories had become huge, digital predecessors had become fast and compact, and both were cheap. As a result, cameras became little computers. The company that once was synonymous with photography was a shadow of its former self. Kodak announced that its employee force would be cut by 30,000, barely a fifth of the size it was during the good times in the 1980s. The move would cost the company more than $3 billion. Moore's law traveled faster than Kodak did, and the rapidly changing world of bits. In the rapidly changing world of bits, it pays to notice even small changes and do something about them. Nothing goes away. 2 with a lot of zeros. That is the number of bits that were stored away in 2007, according to one industry estimate. The capacity of disks has followed its own version of Moore's law, doubling every 2 or 3 years. For the time being, at least, that makes it impossible to save everything. Through recent projections suggest that by 2011 we'd be producing more bits than we can store. In financial industries, federal law now requires massive data retention to assist in audits and investigations of corruption. In many other businesses, economic competitiveness drives companies to save everything they collect and seek new data to retain. Walmart stores have tens of millions of transactions every day, and every one of them is saved: date, time, item, store, price, and who made the purchase, and how, credit, debit, cash, or gift card. Such data is so valuable to planning and the supply chains that stores will pay money to get more of it from their customers. That is really what supermarket loyalty cards provide. Shoppers are supposed to think the store is granting them a special discount in appreciation for their steady business, but actually, the store is paying them for the information about their buying patterns. We might want to think of it like a privacy tax. We pay the regular price unless we want to keep the information about our food, alcohol, pharmaceutical purchases from the market. To keep it to ourselves, we pay extra. The massive databases challenge our expectations about what will happen to the data about us. Take something as simple as staying in a hotel. When you check in, you are given a key card, not a mechanical key, because the key cards can be deactivated instantly. There is no longer any great risk associated with losing your key as long as you report it missing quickly. On the other hand, the hotel now has a record accurate to the second of every time you entered a room, used a gym, or the business center, or went to the back door after hours. That same database could identify every cocktail and steak you charged to your room, which others' rooms you phoned and when, and the brand of everything you bought in the hotel gift shop. This data might be merged with millions like it, analyzed and transferred to the parent company, which owns the restaurants and fitness centers as well as the hotels. It might be lost or stolen or subpoenaed in a court case. The ease of storing information is meant asking for more of it. Birth certificates used to include just information about a child and parents' names, birthplace, and birth dates, plus a parent's occupation. Now, electronic birth records include how much a mother drank and smoked during her pregnancy, whether she had herpes or various other medical conditions, and both parents' social security numbers. Opportunities for research are plentiful, but so are opportunities for mischief and catastrophic data loss. And the data will be kept forever, unless there are policies to get rid of it. For the time being, at least, the data sticks around, and the databases are being intentionally duplicated and backed up for security, or shared while pursuing useful analysis. It is far from certain that data can be permanently expunged, even if we wish that to happen. The internet consists of millions of interconnected computers. Once data gets out, there is no getting it back. Victims of identity theft experience daily the distress of having to remove misinformation from the record. It seems to never go away. Conans 7. Bits move faster than thought. The Internet existed before there were personal computers, and it predicates the fiber optic communication cables that now hold it together. When it started around 1970, ARPANET, as it was called, was designed to connect a handful of universities and military computers. No one imagined the network would contain tens of millions of computers for shipping information around the world in a blink of an eye. Along with the processing power and storage capability, networking has experienced its own exponential growth, with the number of computers interconnected at the rate at which data can be shipped over long distances from space to Earth and from service providers into private homes. The Internet has caused drastic shifts in business practice. Customer service calls are outsourced to India today, not just because labor costs are low there. Labor costs have always been low in India, but international telephone calls used to be expensive. Calls about airline reservations and lingerie returns are answered in India today because it now takes no time and costs no money to send to India the bits representing your voice. The same principle holds true for professional services. When you are x-rayed at your local hospital in Iowa, the radiologist who reads the x-ray may be half a world away. The digital x-rays move back and forth across the world faster than a physical x-ray could be moved between floors of a hospital. When you place an order at a drive-through station at a fast food restaurant, the person taking your order may be in another state. She keys in the order so it appears in the computer screen in the kitchen a few feet from your car, and none are the wiser. Such developments are causing massive changes to the global economy as industries figure out how to keep their workers in one place and ship their business as bits. In the bits world, in which messages flow instantaneously, it can sometimes seem that distances don't matter at all. The consequences can be startling. One of us, while dean of the American College, witnessed the shock of a father receiving condolences on his daughter's death. The story was sad, but familiar, except that this version had a startling twist. The father and daughter were both in Massachusetts, but the condolences arrived from half a world away, before the father had learned his daughter had died. The news, even the most intimate news, travels fast in the bits world. Once it gets out, once in the fall of 2007, when the government of Myanmar suppressed protests by Buddhist monks, television stations around the world showed video clips taken by cell phone, probably changing the posture of the U.S. government. The Myanmar rebellion also shows the power of information when the information is just bits. The story dropped off the front page of the newspaper once the government took control of the internet and cell phone towers. The instantaneous communication of massive amounts of information has created the misimpression that there is a place called cyberspace, a land without frontiers where all the world's people can be interconnected as though they were residents in some small town. That concept has been decisively refuted by the action of the world's courts. National and state borders still count, and count a lot. If a book is bought online in England, the publisher and author are subject to British libel laws rather than those of the homeland of the author or publisher. Under British law, defendants have to prove they are innocent. In the U.S., plaintiffs have to prove the guilt of defendants. An ugly downside to the exploitation of the digital information is its movement around the world, is that the information may become less available even where it can be legally protected. We will return to this subject in Chapter 7. You can't say that on the Internet. Publish fear, libel tourism lawsuits in countries with weak protections for free speech designed to intimidate authors in more open societies. It may prove simpler to publish only a single version of work for sale everywhere, in addition omitting information that might somewhere excite a lawsuit. The good and ill, promise and peril. The digital explosion has thrown a lot of things up for grab, and we all have a stake in who does the grabbing. The way the technology is offered to us, the way we use it, and the consequences of the vast dissemination of digital information are matters not in the hands of the technology experts alone. Governments and corporations and universities and other social institutions have a say, and ordinary citizens to whom these institutions are accountable can influence their decisions. Important choices are made every year in government offices and legislatures, and in town meetings and police stations, in the corporate offices of banks and insurance companies, in purchasing departments, chain stores, and pharmacies. We all can help raise the level of discourse and understanding. We can all help ensure that technical decisions are taken in a context of ethical standards. We offer two basic morals. The first is that information technology is inherently neither good nor bad. It can be used for good or ill, to free us or to shackle us. The second is new technology brings social change, and the changes come with both risks and opportunities. All of us, and all our public agencies and private institutions, have a say in whether the technology will be used for good or ill, and whether we will fall prey to its risks or prosper from the opportunities it creates. Technology is neither good nor bad. Any technology can be used for good or ill. Nuclear reactions create electric power and weapons of mass destruction. The same encryption technology that makes it possible for you to email your friends with confidence that no eavesdroppers will be able to decipher your messages also makes it possible for terrorists to plan their attacks undiscovered. The same internet technology that facilitates widespread distribution of educational work to impoverished students in remote location also enables massive copyright infringement. The photo manipulation tools that are used to enhance your snapshots are used by child pornographers to escape persecution. The key to managing ethical and moral consequences of technology while nourishing economic growth is to regulate the use of technology without banning or restricting its creation. It is a marvel that anyone with a smart cell phone can use a search engine to get answers to obscure questions from almost anywhere. Society is rapidly being freed from the old limitations of geography and status in assessing information. The same technologies can be used to monitor individuals and track their behaviors and control what information they receive. Search engines need not return unbiased results. Many users of web browsers do not realize that sites they visit may archive their actions. Technologically, there could be a record of exactly what you have been accessing and when, as you browse a library, bookstore catalog, or a site selling pharmaceuticals, or a service offering advice on contraception or drug overdose. There are vast opportunities to use this information for evasive but relatively benign purposes such as marketing, but also more questionable practices such as blacklisting and blackmail. Few regulations mandate disclosure of the information being collected or restrict the use of that data restrict the use to which the data can be put. Recent federal laws, such as the U.S. Patriot Act, give the government agencies sweeping authority to sift through mostly innocent data looking for signs of suspicious activity by potential terrorists and notice lesser transactions, such as Governor Spitzer's in the process. Although the World Wide Web now reaches into millions of households, the rules and regulations governing it are not much better than those of the lawless frontiers of the West. Blacklists and whitelists. In the bits world, providers of services can create blacklists or whitelists. If no one on a blacklist can use this service, but everyone else can. For example, an auctioneer might put people on a blacklist if they did not pay for their purchases. But service providers have access to other information about visitors on their websites, might use disclosed and far more sweeping criteria for blacklisting. A whitelist is a list of parties for whom the services are available, with everyone else excluded. For example, a newspaper might whitelist its home delivery subscribers for access to its online content, allowing others into the whitelist only section after they have paid. New technologies bring both risks and opportunities. The same large disk drives that enable everyone with a home computer to analyze millions of baseball statistics also allow anyone with access to confidential information to jeopardize its security. Access to aerial maps via the internet makes it possible for criminals to plan burglaries of upscale homes, but technologically sophisticated police know how the records of such queries can be used to solve crimes. Even the most unelectronic households' livelihoods are changing because of instant worldwide information flows. There are no more pool hustlers today. Journeymen wizards of the queue who could turn up in pool halls posing as out-of-town bunkins just looking to bet on a friendly game and walk away with big winnings. Now, any newcomer comes into town and cleans up. His name and face are on A-to-Z-billiards.com instantly for pro players and everyone else to see. Social networking such sites as Facebook and MySpace and Match have made their founders quite wealthy. They also have given birth to many thousands of new friendships, marriages, and other ventures. But those pretending to be your online friends may not be as they seem. Social networking has made it easier for predators to take advantage of the naive, the lonely, the elderly, and the young. In 2006, a 13-year-old girl, Megan, of Madeline Prairie, Missouri, made online friends with a 16-year-old boy named Josh. When Josh turned against her, writing, "You are a bad person and everyone hates you. The world would be a better place without you," Megan committed suicide. Yet Josh did not really exist. Josh was a MySpace creation. But of whom? An early police report stated that a mother of another girl in the neighborhood acknowledged instigating and monitoring the account. The woman's lawyer later blamed someone who worked for his client. Whomever may have sent the final message to Megan. Prosecutors are having a hard time identifying any law that may have been broken. "I can start MySpace on every single one of you and spread rumors about every single one of you," said Megan's mother. "What's going to happen to me? Nothing." Among the dazzling riches and vast horizon, the internet has created new manifestations of human evil, some of which include cyber harassment that Megan suffered may not be criminal under the existing laws. In a nation deeply committed to free expression as a legal right, which internet evils should be crimes and which ones are just wrong? Vast data networks have made it possible to move work to everywhere the people are, but not people to the work. The results are enormous business opportunities for entrepreneurs who take advantage of these technological new enterprises around the globe. Also, to the other side of the coin, jobs lost to outsourcing. The difference every one of us can make to our workplace or to another institution can be to ask the question at the right time about the risks of some new technological innovations, or to point out the possibility of doing something in the near future that a few years ago would have been utterly impossible. We begin our tour of the digital landscape with a look at our privacy, a social structure the explosion has left in shambles. While we enjoy the benefits of ubiquitous information, we also sense the loss of shelter that privacy once gave us, and we don't know what we want to build in its place. The good and the ill of technology, and the promise and the peril are thrown together when information is spread everywhere. And in the post-privacy world, we stand exposed at the glare of the noonday sun, and sometimes it feels strangely pleasant.